President Buhari seeks approval from the National Assembly for an external loan of $5.513 billion. I'm Linda Akibe, and you're welcome to the Gavel. President Buhari has written to the Senate and House of Representatives requesting the approval of both chambers to borrow $5.513 billion. The loan is to finance the revised 2020 budget, priority projects of the federal government and COVID-19, and the support for state governments. Now, this request is coming nearly a month after President Buhari wrote to both chambers requesting approval to borrow 850 billion naira from the capital markets.
As the Senate may be aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in economic and physical challenges for many countries. Nigeria has also been affected in this regard, especially with the lower demand for crude oil, which has affected our sales, and the sharp decline in the price of oil below $25 per barrel, which is much lower than the $57 per barrel benchmark in the 2020 Appropriation Act. The COVID-19 pandemic has also created the need for additional expenditure in the health sector. All of these have necessitated a review of the 2020 budget and the medium-term expenditure framework 2020 to 2022. Following from paragraph 2, the draft revised budget proposed by the executive for 2020 has a higher deficit. In order to finance this deficit, the federal government is planning to raise funds from both domestic and external sources. For the external component, the government is negotiating with multilateral institutions for funding on concessionary terms. The facilities totaling $5.513 billion being arranged in this regard are detailed in Table 1. Please find attached relevant documents for the facilities. The Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning shall provide any additional information that may be required for your consideration of the request. Whilst looking forward to your timely consideration and approval, please accept the single Senate President the assurances of my high regards.
Senate President Ahmed Lawan reading a letter from President Muhammadu Buhari requesting approval for an external loan of $5.513 billion. This request is coming almost 1 month after the President sought the approval of the National Assembly to borrow 850 billion naira internally. The loan to be sourced externally is to finance the revised 2020 budget, priority federal government projects to address the COVID-19 pandemic and improve Nigeria's food security, as well as support for state governments. The external loan is to come from mainly 4 sources: the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, African Development Bank, and Islamic Development Bank. A breakdown of priority projects of the federal government include support of Nigeria's response to COVID-19 challenges, strengthening healthcare system to improve response to COVID-19, financing smallholder farmers to mitigate food security impact of COVID-19, as well as provision of critical medical supplies to combat the virus, and green imperative to enhance mechanization of agriculture and agro-processing in Nigeria. According to President Buhari, state governments are also experiencing fiscal challenges as a result of COVID-19, and to support the states, facilities are being negotiated. Some of the projects include State Fiscal Transparency, Accountability and Sustainability Program to provide fiscal support to states, COVID-19 Action Recovery and Economic Stimulus to support state-level efforts to protect livelihoods, ensure food security, and stimulate economic activity. The National Assembly has passed the revised 2020 budget through the crucial second reading. The Senate and House of Representatives debated the revised appropriation bill when they resumed plenary earlier than scheduled, ostensibly to give expedited passage to the budget. The amendment of the appropriation bill, according to President Buhari, is necessary because of the sharp decline in oil prices and cuts in oil production quota caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, meaning Nigeria cannot fund the earlier budget passed because of the present realities. Now, during the debate in both houses, which we'll show you in a couple of minutes, lawmakers raised some concerns over budget cuts in some key sectors.
In effect, the assumptions underlying the 2020 Appropriation Act are no longer sustainable. It is also imperative to adjust expected revenues, considering the widespread disruptions in other domestic economic activities, as well as international trade and transportation, due to the measures implemented across the world to curtail the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Furthermore, it is necessary to allocate resources in the Appropriation Act 2020 to ensure effective implementation of required emergency measures and other actions necessary to mitigate the negative socioeconomic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The President of the Senate reads a letter containing the revised 2020 budget and medium-term expenditure framework, MTEF, which President Buhari sent to the National Assembly. President Buhari in the letter explains that the amendment of the 2020 budget is necessary because of the sharp decline in oil prices and cut in oil production quota caused by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Following from paragraph 2, the draft revised budget proposed by the executive for 2020 has a higher deficit. In order to finance this deficit, the federal government is planning to raise funds from both domestic and external sources.
The upper chamber suspended its rules to give accelerated hearing to the 2020 budget, which is revised from 10.594 to 10.509 trillion naira. 2.951 trillion naira is marked for debt servicing, while benchmark price of crude oil has been revised from $57 to $35 per barrel. The content of the amended 2020 appropriation bill include total budget 10.509 trillion naira, debt servicing 2.951 trillion naira, benchmark price of crude oil $25 per barrel, exchange rate 360 naira to a dollar, recurrent expenditure 4.928 trillion naira, and capital expenditure 2.230 trillion naira. Some senators are, however, worried about the reduction of the budgets of some critical agencies.
Whatever adjustment was being made to the 2020 Appropriation Act, our health sector, and whatever had been appropriated for the running of the health sector was left intact. This is very significant. And this is consistent with the realities on ground and the mood of the country and the global pandemic situation. I also note, Mr. President, that the agricultural sector was also given due consideration. Mr. President, in principle, it is also my own very candid opinion that the judiciary and the justice sector must be given due consideration, regardless of what the situation is. And this is what we show that we have a thorough understanding of the political economy of budget adjustment.
There are three interventionist agencies of government, namely the NDDC, and then of course the Northeast Development Commission, and then of course the Basic Healthcare Fund. In fact, each of them has gone from about 40 to 50% reduction. The NDDC and the NEDC, we know their position right now, particularly the NEDC that is still in its formative stage, the Northeast Development Commission, having to reduce their transfer by about 50%. I think that is huge. COVID-19 intervention here is 213.5 billion. That again, if it is only for isolation centers and buying of ventilators, of course, what we have in basic health is 25 billion compared to the 213.5 billion going to COVID-19 intervention. the disparity is too huge. Therefore, we must break down the 213.5 billion intervention for COVID-19. It must be a lot clearer to us, because what is there for basic health, 25 billion, COVID-19 is 213 billion. The disparity asks for a lot of amendment.
Even if we ease and we go out, the challenges of COVID-19 remain with us for the next 2 years. The reason is because until when we have adequate treatment and we have vaccines, we cannot say that we are free, and then the health sector is exposed. The second thing is that the capital allocation to the health sector is reduced by 25% in this proposed amendment. How do we improve the infrastructure? And I saw in the document that was given to us in terms of the MTEL that there's 186 billion allocated, but I didn't see where that is in this in the main budget itself. Is that intervention from the CBN, which is extra budgetary, or is it within the budget? The total COVID-19 allocation here, just like that speaker said, is 100. But in the printed budget is 213. We don't have the details.
Mr. President, what we are crying about today is the reduction in the earnings from oil. What if tomorrow we go to get the oil and we get water? What happens? We pray that day does not come, but nobody is sure whether it will come. So I think this has given us the opportunity to look inwards, to see what we can do as a country, to deviate from being mono-economy to a better economy. Mr. President, they say that necessity is the mother of invention. We have to tap into the advantages afforded by this COVID-19 to ensure that this country is stabilized when it comes to issue of funding. Mr. President, we are trying to cut our budget to meet up to this reality. But in cutting down, Mr. President, we have to plead with the executive that they should implement this budget. It is not just about adjusting it, it's about implementation. They have to implement this budget because of the situation on ground. We are representing about 200 million Nigerians. We understand what happens everywhere in this country. Therefore, Nigerians are looking up to us as their representatives to try whatever we can do to ensure that the economy of this country is stabilized. And the economy can only be stabilized when the budget we are about to about to pass is being implemented by the executive.
Within the country, Mr. President, our revenue net is still very much limited. There are still areas where Nigeria do not seem to care about generating revenue. I think, Mr. President, the time has come for our nation to look at how we can introduce toll gates in our highways, especially those who drive in exotic cars, so that they could equally help in improving our revenue base. In the last decade or so, we used to have some of these toll gates, but suddenly they were removed by the other party when they were in government. I think the time has come for those who drive in exotic cars, SUV cars, to pay toll while they partner these cars. Again, Mr. President, I think I should equally mention that those who live in mansions in our cities, those who have taken so much from the society, now that the society is bleeding, before the masses will rise, I think we should start looking at the possibility of introducing property tax for those who live in mansions to start paying back to the society to save the economy of our nation from collapsing.
Mr. President, we need to really liberate the economy. And for that reason, budgetary provision alone is not enough. We need stimulus package that will generate a lot of economic activities.
The bill passed second reading and was sent to the Committee on Finance to produce a report by Tuesday, the 2nd of June.
You're welcome back to the Gavel. We'll continue with the debate on the amended 2020 budget, but this time in the House of Representatives.
Members of the House of Representatives also debated the amended 2020 budget. The lawmakers gave several recommendations, particularly regarding the saving culture of the country, while some questioned the new benchmark price of crude oil.
From what we have seen now, that we must improve on our saving culture. Mr. Speaker, it is a critical time and there's no way we can keep appropriating and keep this situation for so long and Also, we must reduce the recurrent expenditure. Mr. Speaker, if you go through the proposed budget, we will see that about 70% of the national budget is on recurrent. There's no way we can sustain that, Mr. Speaker, on recurrent, that 70% of the proposed budget. Also, diversification of our economy, Mr. Speaker, we rely solely on crude oil. And as we speak today, you and I know that even the benchmark that we have given in this budget, Mr. Speaker, is $25 per. It is inevitable. There is no way. And we propose about 1.9.
Mr. Speaker, what was proposed was 57. What is in the Act is 57. Presently, they are proposing $32 less. Anything that will occasion that this Parliament will approve a benchmark where Nigeria will sustain loss, we will not support it.
Every time the word diversification is mentioned, our mind shifts out of oil and gas, and we begin to look at agriculture, solid minerals, so on and so forth. But the truth of the matter is, we need to diversify the oil economy and the oil revenue itself. This is an issue, or this is a sector that can bring 13 trillion naira per annum in this country. We have the upstream, we have the downstream. What about the midstream? Have we mined what we have? The cash cow, have we extracted everything that is valuable from it?
Globally, people are now seeing that based on the easing, and the moment the airlines come back and people begin to travel, there is tendency that the price of crude oil will move up. So if we're able to look at the current benchmark that is being proposed and increase it to 27, we can now reduce the budget deficit of 4.5 trillion from the difference that we'll be using to increase the benchmark. That will assist us.
Other observations made about the borrowing plan, which we had to review. It was reviewed in the good interest of the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The government decided now to take some loans from the IMF. And the IMF loan is to be taken from our existing savings in the IMF. So the level of interest there is quite very negligible that we can still go ahead with it to fund some of these economic or these financial gaps in the implementation of this budget.
Those people say aye. Those against say nay. Let's have it.
The revised appropriation bill scaled second reading, and the President's request for a loan of $5.5 billion was referred to the Committee on Loans and Debt Management.
Let's take a look at more activities in the National Assembly during the week. The House of Representatives has commenced investigation into the maltreatment of Nigerians in China by the Chinese authorities. The investigation is being carried out by the Joint Committees of Foreign Affairs, Inter-Parliamentary, Diaspora and Human Rights. Speaking during the meeting to consider the interim report from initial findings of the committee, the committee chairman says it is seeking a veritable basis for Parliament to engage the Chinese Parliament and advise the executive on the next line of action.
At the level of the continent, Nigeria, as part of Africa and indeed the West African sub-region, shares the membership of many international groups, organizations and associations with China. One of the groups is Forum of China and African Cooperation, FOCAC, Afro-Asian Cooperation, and many others through which the both countries have enjoyed cooperation, friendship, collaboration, and progress. It is therefore disturbing that very negative news materials, especially on social media, in the very recent past have continued to emanate from a country with which we enjoy all of what I have mentioned above. This is not, however, an attempt to validate or accord the status of truth to all that we saw or continue to see on social media in relation to the treatment meted out on Nigerians visiting or living in China. but to use this material as a basis to evaluate the tension that has resulted in the agitation for governmental action on the issue.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives is asking the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control to immediately brief a joint committee of the House on its findings relating to the mysterious deaths in Bonny Island, Rivers State. The House reached a resolution following a motion drawing its attention to the claims that about 13 people have died from symptoms suspected to be those of COVID-19.
This House is also aware that in the last 6 weeks, mysterious deaths are occurring in Bonny Island, in Rivers State, and is reported to have claimed 13 lives in just a few days of notice. Further aware that officials of the Rivers State Ministry of Health and the Nigerian Center for Disease Control have collected samples in Bonny Island for testing to determine what is responsible for the strange occurrence. The House further notes these symptoms exhibited by the victims, they are closely related but not exactly as those of COVID-19. We have come to ask the House to resolve to urge the Nigerian Center for Disease Control to immediately brief the Joint Committee of the House currently investigating the dead fishes in Bonny and other Niger Delta coastal communities on their findings in Bonny for necessary intervention of other relevant government agencies.
Moving to the upper chamber, the chairman, Senate Committee on Niger Delta Affairs, Senator Peter Nwoboshi, says no amount of blackmail will stop the Senate from investigating allegations of misappropriation of 40 billion naira by the Interim Management Committee of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC.
The National Assembly, because of
briefing journalists at the National Assembly, Senator Nwoboshi says all allegations leveled against the National Assembly by the acting managing director of the NDDC, Keme Bradikumo Ponde, and the executive director project, Dr. Cairo Ojubo, are false. The acting managing director of the NDDC on Tuesday alleged that the National Assembly inserted over 500 projects into the 2019 budget of the agency, and that some senators got over 1,000 contracts from the NDDC. But Senator Nwoboshi is challenging the NDDC to name the senators implicated in the award of the contracts and report to security agencies.
The Senate, in its wisdom, said that he will set up an ad hoc committee and said, please go and investigate all these things we have been hearing and report back to the Senate. Why don't you allow these people to do their work and give their report to the Senate? Blackmail will not stop us from them from doing the work. The 2019 budget was given to them on the 20th of April. They signed for it. They have been implementing that budget since 20th of April. No complaint. Nobody discussed the budget. Nobody said that the budget was balkanized. Nobody said anything. Just because the National Assembly has now decided to investigate your activities of the IMC, the issue of balkanization has come up. The issue of contracts, inclusion of contracts came up.
This is the final.
Meanwhile, the chairman of the House Committee on NDDC has also reacted to the allegations by the NDDC of budget inflation and illegal award of contracts. According to him, the House did not inflate any budget and does not award contracts.
They said federal government contribution, unpaid arrears by federal government. They stated it as 35 billion. And take a look. The budget of Nigeria, it's an open document. Take a look at it. You can go to www.budgetoffice.gov.ng. It's online. And look at the budgetary provision. It was 0 for unpaid arrears. Yet you stated 35 billion. So in tune with this, the budget it means the budget revenue proposal submitted to us by NDDC was inflated unjustifiably to the tune of 63 billion naira.
He also reacted to allegations that the House was against the forensic probe of the NDDC by the president.
We are in support of forensic because the truth must be laid bare. But what we are saying, in the process of doing forensic, if there are allegations, you should be able to defend yourself. And not hide under forensic as if forensic has granted you immunity. Forensic is not a medium of granting immunity.
Now, this is where we call it a day on this week's edition of The Gavel. If you have any views on any of the issues discussed, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us and see you again next week.